All right. Hey, we looked at some ridiculous laws. I knew it was going to go south when the first one, Texas, had weird laws. It's like, they don't normally have stuff like that. If you want to sell your eyeballs in Texas, I feel like you could. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Why don't you try? I would try with a friend's eyeballs, not your own. But yeah, so rules can be ridiculous. There are extremely ridiculous rules. You could probably list some of your own. In my home, we don't have rules. It's anarchy all the time. I'm just kidding. But one of the things that drives me nuts is playing games with my children. We have this thing in our house called Lange rules, where Landry just makes up rules at random things. And he'll be playing a game, and it's just, okay, he makes up a rule because he wants to win. The most ridiculous is when my children are pretending. They're pretending they have powers or something or other, and then they make up a rule about the other person's powers that they cannot have, and it turns into arguing, and it's just like, why don't you just pretend you overruled his rule? And it's just like, it is pretend. This can be whatever you want, but it's just like, stymied by this. I was going to fly, but I'm not allowed to above 300 feet. But yeah, so we get ridiculous rules, and when we hear those things, it's just like you want to ignore it, right? If it's like, hey, we're at the Grand Canyon. They say, don't step across here because it's a 400-foot drop. You're like, I get that one. That makes sense. If it's, hey, you have to do this for no apparent reason just because I want you to do it, you're just like, I'm doing that now, and you cannot stop me, right? We don't, like, rules that are just there to be cumbersome and, like, oppressive and that don't make any sense to us, rules that, like, just seem to be them trying to ruin things, you want to rebel against. You have no vested interest in following them. And we can feel that way with God, right? We can feel that way with what God tells us to do. We can feel like God doesn't want me to have fun. He wants to ruin my good time. There's no reason for him to take this away from me. And we have to look at the rule maker to see, is this something that even if I don't understand it, I should follow it, right? Because we have flawed people in our lives, right? Even some of the rules that we make up. All right, for our kids, it's like, okay, there's times that by frustration, you'll hear around my house, new rule, and just out of nowhere, just, okay, we're getting a new rule coming in, right? And like, and it may not be the best thing. It's like, new rule, you're never allowed to watch TV ever again. Like, maybe that's a little bit harsh, but we need it, but flawed people make flawed rules. But God, in his sovereignty and his goodness and his faithfulness and his trustworthiness, he makes rules that are good. That even if I don't understand and grasp it, they're still good. And so when we look at laws and rules from a perfect, loving lawgiver, it's not oppressive, it's freeing. And you can say, well, no, I can look at the laws that God has laid out, and those don't feel freeing, those feel oppressive. But we're going to look at God's word today and look at, hey, this is why this is that way. This is why it's free. This is what it does for me. This is how it is the absolute best thing for me. So we're going to be, we've been talking in Exodus. We're kind of have walked through. So we had, God gave his promise to Abraham, said, hey, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. And he said, that's fantastic. I'm 99 and have no children. You better get going. And God says, don't worry, it's going to happen. And so he has a child, and we continue on, and his family starts to grow and grow and grow, and we get Joseph, and Joseph, God uses him to feed his people while a famine is going on. He becomes number 2 in charge of Egypt, and they move there, and their family grows and grows and grows, so much so that this greatest empire on earth at this time, Egypt, says, hey, we're getting kind of scared of these guys. We need to put them in slavery to kind of hold them down so they don't overtake us, and so they go through hundreds of years of that. And that's where we catch up to the story. God has sent Moses to say, hey, you are going to free my people. And so he frees them. They cross the Red Sea. And then they kind of get to this point of, okay, now what? Where are we at here? They've gotten out. And then we have this time in Exodus chapters 19 and 20 where we have the 10 commandments are given. So Moses has gone up on this mountain, and God speaks to him. And we're going to look at what these things are. We're going to look at what is happening to get an idea of, okay, this is what God wants for us. So Exodus chapter 19, verse 3, it says this. It says, while Moses went up to God, the Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. Right? So God talks to Moses and says, hey, I'm going to do amazing things through you. You've seen what I've done. You've seen what's going to happen. This is my plan for you. Right? And so we can look at this, and so he starts to saying, hey, this is how you live free. This is how you're going to be. This is the life I have for you. This is the plan I have for you. It's not like, hey, you're going back to slavery. Hey, you're going to be wandering around. It's, I have a plan to make you my special people. You will be a kingdom of priests. It's a beautiful thing he is offering them. And he's saying, hey, you know what I've done, right? Like you know and understand what I've done for you in the past. You just saw what I did at the Red Sea. Know that I can do this. All right? He says, now therefore, right? So it's, hey, because of who I am and what I've done, because I'm trustworthy, this is what I'm about to do. And then he says, but hey, if you obey, if you keep the covenant, it's basically if you trust me, right? I am trustworthy, but you have to trust me for this to happen. And so we have this, you will be a treasured kingdom of priests. You're going to live in freedom. There's not going to be people that are whipping you and beating you, telling you to build these things. He's saying, I have this plan for you. And if you trust me and go with where I'm taking you, this is what is going to happen, right? And then we fast forward a little bit. It's kind of this, okay, well, why can you trust this? Like, why can I trust what you're saying here? Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 and 2, right? He says, and God spoke all these words, saying, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It's a reminder, and he keeps on reminding them, like, hey, I am going to ask you to take steps that you don't know where you are going. I'm going to ask you to follow something you may not grasp or understand, but remember what I've done for you. And for you and I, like when we are looking to follow Christ, when we're looking to follow what he's laid out, there's going to be things you don't want to do. There's going to be things that are not as comfortable as what you would choose. There's going to be things that God says, this is where you need to go. Trust me in this, and we can, in that moment, choose, well, I don't understand it, and I don't grasp it, so I'm going to make my own choice, or, God, I'm going to look back on how trustworthy you have been to me, to my family, to your church, to your people, from the beginning of time through now, and how you will be faithful through the end of time, and I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust that more than what I grasp and understand. I'm going to trust you in this, because what you have done in the past has always been trustworthy, and you will be now. He says, so you can trust this. And then what does he do here, right? He says, I'm not even going to leave it up to you how to guess to follow. I'm just going to tell you this is what it takes to follow me. But he starts with, trust me, and then this is what I'm asking you to do. But he's also saying, trust me, this is what is going to be the best thing for you. We get to Exodus 20, verse 3. And you've probably heard some of these before. He says, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. All right? 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. Basically anybody. All right? And so he lays this out and say, hey, this is how you do it, right? This is how you trust me. This is how you follow me. This is what I'm asking you to do to live that freed life that I have laid out for you. And in our minds, like, okay, freedom means no rules. No, freedom means good rules that help you and focus you, right? We have this view of freedom meaning that anything I want to do is fair game. No, freedom means, hey, you're not weighed down by stuff that's going to get in the way. You are freed from the weight of trying to figure this out. God's not saying, hey, trust me and do what I ask. I hope you can guess right. He's saying, trust me and do what I ask. This is what I have for you. This is the best life you can possibly live. Here's how I am laying out. And so these first few laws that he gives, these first few commandments that he lays out are, hey, this is how you love God. He lists 4 things. This is how you love me. All right? Any of you that are in a relationship, you probably go through a certain amount of time. If you've been with that person for any amount of time, you're thinking, how do I show them they're cared for? How do I show them love? How do I show them what they need to see? And God, this is fantastic, right? guys, at least the married guys, I'm sure you'd always say, it'd be fantastic if I would just have a list where she said, this is how I feel loved. I mean, this makes it easier, right? Thankfully, my wife doesn't need to do that. Like, she's like, here's all the stuff he does over and over and over again. But God says, hey, I'm going to tell you how to love me. I understand you can't grasp this. You can't understand this. This is how you love me, right? And these we cover quite a bit here, right? You shall have no other gods like before me, right? Commitment, exclusivity, like this stuff works in personal, just relationships as well, right? Just common sense, okay? And say, hey, love God alone, right? And then we have, you shall not have any carved images or likeness or anything that is in heaven, in the earth, or like beneath it. Basically, we're covering everything here. Don't make anything that you worship. And it's this idea of, hey, don't cheat, right? Do not make a God for yourself. I am the Lord your God. It's exclusive. It's just me. Don't cheat on me with something else. Don't go for a cheap knockoff. Don't go for an imitation. Just follow me. Trust me. Love me. All right? And then don't take his name in vain. Respect, right? This idea of give God his respect and honor. And then keep the Sabbath day holy, all right? And this one's kind of well, how does that necessarily fit? What does that mean, right? He's saying, trust me, but also set aside time for me. Set aside time. You say, I am with you. I'm not doing anything else. My favorite part of this is you don't do any work, your son or daughter don't do any work. Like anyone have a parent that on the weekend, right? Hey, they're sitting on the couch, but they're like, I need you to do this, this, and this, right? My parents did it. Dig a ditch in the backyard for a month so we can put a patio in. It's like, we rented a Bobcat, it'd be done in 3 hours, but that's fine. We'll do this for all of the fall, but I had a 1.8 GPA, so we got to keep the peace there, okay? So, but, yeah, that happened, right? Right, so he says, hey, all right, do this. This is how you love me. So this is how you love God. If you want to live this free life, love God. This is how you do it. Then he goes on and says, hey, all right, there's other parts of this too. Verses 12 through 17 of chapter 20 says, honor your father and your mother that your days may be long in the land of the Lord your God has given you. That's, good advice. It's practical too. Don't do something that make your parents want to kill you, right? And you'll live long. All right, honor your father and mother. All right, it says you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor's. All right, there's a lot of stuff he just says, I'm going to cover the whole gamut here, just in case you're thinking I can covet my neighbor's rabbits, but not the ox. Just say, no, none of it. Nothing that's not yours. Don't covet it, all right? And saying, this is how you love others. So we have 4 that are, this is how you love God. Then we have 6 that are, this is how you love others. This is how your interactions with other people should work. Honor your father and mother. Respect. Don't murder. I feel like it's respectful to not murder somebody, right? Don't commit adultery. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't cheat. Don't lie. Respect. Don't covet. Respect. It's all kind of that same thing. And it's a picture of, hey, the relationship and the interactions I have with others will reflect the relationships I have with Christ. That if I'm a person that murders, covets, whatnot, there's probably something that's not right in my relationship with Christ either. And so the same principles apply to both. But even more than this, right? You have these 10 commandments, and again, there are people that hey, we don't want these put out in front of a courthouse because whatever. I don't want to be reminded of these rules, but it's, hey, freedom in my mind is just I can do whatever I want, but freedom is here is exactly how you live life and avoid heartache, avoid pain, avoid everything that will pull you off the right track from what you've been promised in the life God has for you. This is how you do it. That's freedom. It's saying, hey, it's putting up these guardrails that say, hey, go this way. There's a line on the road. You follow that. There's heartache on the left. There's heartache on the right. Stay off of that stuff and just trust him in this. That's the freedom. And he says, this is how you live within that. Here are 10 things to help you live within that. But more than that, it even goes back to what he says to his people in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6. Where he's saying, hey, love the Lord your God. All right, love God. And then in Leviticus 19, right, he says, love others. And say, these are the 2 things that you do. This is what you're supposed to do. You love God and love others. And he tells you how to do it. It's idiot-proof, but a lot of times we're idiots, right? You say, hey, it isn't hard, but you have to trust me. See, that's what the problem lies in, is that it's not following God is so difficult. It's not trusting myself, trusting him instead is hard. And when he says, hey, this is what you need to avoid, we say, I think I'm okay. He's saying, trust me in this, right? God's initial command is love God, love others, and it is the same throughout time. You look in the New Testament, he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. He's saying, I have not changed. This is what I told you when I brought you out of Egypt. This is what I still want. And this is what leads you to the life that I have for you. 10 Commandments is, this is how you live this life. You don't have to guess. You don't have to worry about it. Just trust me. Follow what I laid out for you, and you will have the life that I have created you for. Now, it doesn't mean that there won't be pain and sorrow and heartache, but you're going to be on the track for the life he's called you to live the life for the purpose he created you for. Right? God's law shows us how to live in freedom and love because he's trustworthy. That's what we have to wrap our minds around first, that if I'm not going to trust God, whatever I do won't make a difference. Trusting him is where I start. Because when he asks me to do something, when he calls me to do something that I can't comprehend, that doesn't mesh with my culture, that doesn't mesh with what those around me are doing, I am at a point of making a choice of, am I trusting my friend group? Am I trusting my parents? Am I trusting my culture? Whatever it is, or am I trusting God? And every decision that you make comes down to that. It's not, is this what I want to do, or is this bad for me? It's, do I trust God and what he's called me to, or am I trusting something else? And that's the decision that we have to make. And we go back to, God, you've been trustworthy. You've never failed me. You always will be trustworthy. And so I can trust you in this moment when I don't understand and don't grasp it.